Building the pyramids made the Egyptians to think about art, architecture, to think about astronomy, and this is why they became genius, because they have to build the tomb of the king who will be a god.
Dr. Howes has discovered the remains of the surveyor's original workings.
We found in our excavation holes about 40 centimeters in diameter, and no one understood the function of these holes. We found that these holes has to do with making the square base of the pyramid. After they finish the square base of the pyramid, they cut in the solid rock, and they made the base of the pyramid about 8 meters high, only from the rock of the plateau.
The stones were dragged from the quarry to a short ramp and then hauled up onto the base. Dr. Howes has discovered remains of the ramp which stretched 1,000 feet from the quarry.
The ramp, based on my discovery, is located to the southwest corner of the Great Pyramid.
After the stones were hauled up onto the base, Dr. Howes believes they were then moved upwards using a girdle or spiral ramp. This wrapped around the outside of the pyramid and was made from mud and rubble. The spiral ramp grew higher as the pyramid was gradually built up. No one knows with certainty the exact ramp design. Other archaeologists believe the ramp was a straight one.
I prefer the long straight ramp option, partly because a ramp circling the pyramid would have been inherently unstable for the heavy loads to be dragged up it. And it's also difficult to understand how you could drag these heavy blocks round the corners on such a ramp.
But a straight ramp to the top would have ended up being a mile long, stretching far beyond the quarry. To retain a manageable gradient, its length and height would have needed continual adjustment. On the other hand, the spiral ramps have cornering problems. As the Great Pyramid grew higher, the stones became smaller. Rollers running under the stones may have been used here for maneuvering. The builders used only the simplest techniques.
The Egyptians used stone tools and copper tools, copper very frequently mixed with arsenic, which of course hardens up the copper, but iron was certainly not used. In fact, the Egyptians were very late into the Iron Age.
Without any sophisticated tools, the stones were fitted with watertight precision to a height of 480 feet. Until little more than 150 years ago, the Great Pyramid remained the tallest structure on Earth. When built to the top, it resembled a series of steps. It was then ready to be cased in top-quality limestone.
And then, of course, you start smoothing it off from the top down. So you do the top bit, then you take the girdle ramp down, then the next bit, and so on, until the whole thing is done.
After 23 years, Khufu's tomb, the largest pyramid ever built, was complete. Pyramids are the most enduring ancient structures on Earth, and the Great Pyramid is the only ancient wonder of the world standing today. It has been imitated many times. Its stable form inspired one of today's most famous architects, I.M. He designed the pyramid at the Louvre in Paris out of glass.
Pyramids built of stone is solid, it's for the dead. And I hope the glass pyramid is transparent, is for the living. But one thing I learned to respect the Egyptians is the proportion of that pyramid, of the Giza pyramid. It's the only one that we came to that satisfies from both directions, whether you look at it head on or look at it at 45 degrees. It's neither too flat nor too peaky. So I think that proved a point that, to myself anyway, that the Egyptians were right 4,000 of years ago.
Khufu's pyramid was so admired that his son and grandson followed him, building their tombs alongside his on the Giza plateau. But the Great Pyramid has remained the father of all ancient structures.
The people came for the first time, they looked at it, said, God, how it was built, who built it? Arabs, when they came in the 9th century AD, they said that man fears time and time fears pyramids. It's true. The pyramids are immortal. It will live because of the way that the pyramid was constructed.
The techniques used to build the Great Pyramid would pave the way for the other 6 world wonders to follow. The Great Pyramid, the foundation for the other world wonders, was built in 2650 BC.
It would take another 2,000 years before the next wonder of the ancient world was created in the most spectacular city on Earth, Babylon. The city was surrounded by inhospitable terrain for hundreds of miles. Merchants journeyed across the wilderness from every corner of the ancient world to trade their goods in the wealthy city. But of all the sights in Babylon, one impressed the parched travellers more than any other: the Hanging Gardens.
I'm most intrigued by the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I wish it was still there. Of all the 7 wonders, that is the one I wish had not been destroyed. It's so unusual. It excites one's imagination.
Fragments of the ancient city survive, but the Hanging Gardens have been lost forever. Some scholars doubt whether they could have existed here. How was it possible to have built terraced gardens in an area without building stone?
Babylon's built on a huge, great, flat alluvial plain, and there's no stone nearby, so they have to use mud. And they would dig the mud from the riverbank, creating a sort of moat around the city. And then the mud would be formed into bricks. And then as it bakes in the sun, that you would end up with really quite a sturdy product. You can't just take the bare mud and pack it into a brick. So he's processing the mud by stamping it and adding water to it to give it just the right consistency, so that when it is slopped into the mould, he has a brick which you can recognisably see as a brick and not just a heap of mud. Mud, when it's baked and compacted, is a very strong and capable building material. And there are many examples in ancient history of walls that are built to really quite a significant height using baked earth and mud. Sometimes that needs to be reinforced, perhaps with straw or reeds, which would be laid flat and then more earth compacted on top. But as long as you created a big, wide, massive wall, essentially, it would be a very strong and capable material.
Babylon was situated on the Euphrates in present-day Iraq. In the 6th century BC, King Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt it. The walls were so splendid that the Greek poet Antipater had included them as one of the 7 wonders. Herodotus was also impressed by them.
They formed a square. Along the top were walkways wide enough for 2 chariots to pass. There were 100 bronze gates in the circuit of the walls. It was some 56 miles around the whole city.
Behind the Ishtar Gateway, inside the city walls, the streets were laid out on a grid plan. Babylon was the most splendid city in the world. A blend of sophistication and order. King Nebuchadnezzar ruled Babylonia from his palace. He married Princess Amytis from the land of Media. Their marriage symbolized a prosperous union between their countries. Babylonia now looked forward to a period of peace and plenty. Above the palace, Nebuchadnezzar built the grandest celebration of this new era, the Hanging Gardens. They were a spectacular surprise for his queen. The earliest account of them comes from Berossus, a priest writing 200 years after they were built.
And within this palace, Nebuchadnezzar erected the so-called Hanging Garden, because his wife, having been brought up in the country of Media, had a passion for mountain surroundings.
Gardens are often controlled by the monarch of a particular culture. That monarch is showing that he or she can control the landscape and can make it flower in a way that God cannot in the landscape around them. Controlling water, of course, is controlling life in a very desert landscape or in an arid landscape is a great feat.
In the Middle East, gardening was a respected profession. Plants were grown for medicine and also for the perfume industry. The importance of fragrance may explain why accounts record that some gardeners were blind and some female.
Records show that Nebuchadnezzar's gardener was given special rations from the palace. He is believed to have been an expert from Judea, a country with a similarly arid climate. The Babylonians had a great knowledge of plants.
The gardeners in Babylon would have selected the best plants to thrive in the hot, arid climate.
The Middle East is not all a desert, but